Hello, everyone. I want to share with you a portion of a lecture that I gave this morning to a special group. I call this group my Tabor Research Community. They're self-selected. We meet together once a month on Zoom, and weekly I share with them through the website Patreon different posts, and we also have a community chat feature and so forth. And the way you join this group is just decide to join at whatever level you choose. There's no set membership fee. There's different levels you can come in. But the different thing about my group is everybody gets exactly the same thing. So you choose whatever level you come in on. The funds raised go to a research fund that is used to fund some of the projects that I'm talking about. So we take topics along the way. So month by month, when we meet on Zoom, usually at the end of the month, as we did today, we're pursuing a topic. Sometimes it goes for 3 or 4 months. The current topic is the notion of what was called in Roman antiquity the divine man, theos aner in Greek. The idea that there are these extraordinary human beings that have a miraculous birth. They're full of wisdom even as a child, and they do all sorts of wonders and miracles, and they oppose rulers, and they fight for justice and righteousness. They're almost kind of superheroes, but they're flesh and blood. And then at the end of their lives, they typically are either killed or persecuted, or sometimes just escape their enemies, and they ascend to heaven and they become gods. You probably know some of the names of some of these figures. Asclepius and Apollonius of Tyana, and even Alexander the Great and Plato, they all get stories told about them that are set in this literary genre, almost like, let me tell you the story of my hero or my god that I follow. So they're quite popular in the period around the time of Jesus of Nazareth. So the question is, when you take one of our gospels, particularly, let's say, the earliest gospel, I think, is the Gospel of Mark, does it fit this model of what are called aretalogies? An aretalogy is a literary work that sings the divine praises of one of these figures. So is that what we have in the New Testament Gospels? What are the Gospels? I mean, they're obviously a piece of writing, but what sort of shape do they take? And especially a gospel like Luke that has the full birth and all of the miracles and other activities, walking on water, casting out demons, healing the blind, raising the dead, and so forth. And then at the end, opposing enemies, getting crucified, but being raised from the dead and ascending to heaven. That would be the pattern of one of these figures. So, one of the questions that's been raised for the last 200 years, since the 1830s, is the question of to what degree was Jesus modeled after these kinds of figures? How much is historical? How much is literary? How much is mythological? And if you do a comparison with Jesus and any of these figures, what do you come out thinking or saying? Is there any nugget of history in some of these stories? And if so, would you ever be able to recover it? So in this particular segment, it's a longer 2 hour session we had. I've just picked a segment. I'm going to pick a couple more. What I did is I went over an article by the late Morton Smith, who was a friend of mine, the great historian of religions, one of the most amazing, knowledgeable people of the previous generation. So in this particular video, to open up the session today, I introduced an article written in the Journal of Biblical Literature by Morton Smith, and it's about Gospels, aretalogies, and romance literature of this type and how they compare to the Gospels. He calls it a prolegomena to the study of these materials, just introducing you. It's very dense. It's got a lot of notes and so forth. I can't put a link to the article itself because it's copyrighted. I can't put it out on the internet. but I will put the bibliographical information so you can go find it on the internet on your own and get your own copy through JSTOR or some of the other services that allow you to order journal articles. Even public libraries, you can check and would probably get this for you. So I take you through that article. Then I take you to my blog, jamestabor.com. And I have a whole section, the Jewish Roman world of Jesus. And one of the topics is heroes and divine men and what do we know about them and so forth. And we go over some of the main texts. And that's the introduction to the topic that I'm going to share publicly. So if you're interested in this, you can join the Patreon. You can check it out. I'll put the link in the description. I'd love to have any people of goodwill. We have open and wonderful discussions, respectful, all points of view. I would think we might have the most diverse group that's ever gathered around the central idea of trying to understand the times of Jesus of Nazareth, the historical Jesus, Christian origins, the New Testament, early Christianity for maybe the first 100 or 200 years, comparing it to the Dead Sea Scrolls and other literature and so forth. We cover everything. We particularly are working on projects together involving ossuaries and inscriptions and tombs in Jerusalem and some of the archaeological things that I'm involved in. So take a look at the Patreon. Some of it's public. You can scroll through and see some of the things that are there. But if you'd like to join, you're welcome. And I hope you'll find this little segment interesting. There are other lives of great heroes and men circulating in the Hellenistic period, the what we call the late Roman period. And so it's obviously unavoidable that scholars are going to start comparing these. If you do the life of any figure, Alexander the Great, even the Emperor Augustus, whoever, any philosopher, poet, religious figure, and gods that are humans that became gods, like Asclepius and Apollonius, uh, the parallels are going to be raised. You know, what sort of parallels are there? So he starts with the very word, what is an aretalogy? And he shows you that the derivation of the word, apparently Augustus, according to Suetonius, used to have dinner parties. He says they were modest but pleasant. This is the emperor. He kept the conversations going. He brought in musicians, actors, and even low-browed jugglers. This is so funny to me. So you picture the emperor having his court and his parties with his friends. And they're from the circus. And also aretologoi, or this is the plural, aretologi. So tellers of stories or something like that. We'd probably say tall tales, you know. So we don't know the content of that, but that's one of the places that the word occurs. So there's general agreement that an aretology is a miracle story or collection of miracle stories, hence Reitzenstein, Hellenistische Wundererzählungen, wonder tales, see? And that the primary use of such collections was praise and propaganda. Very well put. Morton Smith is brilliant. Praise and propaganda. Look at what this person was able to do. Listen to his wisdom, how he defeats his enemies. So you're going to have dialogues with people and so forth. Is Mark reflecting a kind of literary genre that's just out there and he was influenced by it? Because Philosopherus is later. We think much, probably a bit later than the Gospels. Or is Philostratus maybe reacting to the Jesus story? That's something that is debated. So he goes on through, and I just marked some things for this particular session today. And he's talking about in early Christianity, this became a problem. So, do you know Justin? Justin is 150. He's a Christian. He's often called Justin Martyr. We have his apology. uh, 2 volumes. And one of the things he has to deal with is stories that are so parallel to Jesus that why then should we believe Jesus? Because Jesus is one of many such figures that's going around doing these same things. So they contain stories of the hero's miracles, also an account of his travels. Think of our gospel: travels, sayings, prophecies, martyrdom, escape from death, and then appearances thereafter. Well, that's quite a pattern, right? I mean, that fits Mark, that fits Matthew and Luke, even fits John to some extent. So that's different than a bare list of miracles. Like, wow, this person did, he raised the dead, he walked on water, he turned water to wine, and so forth. No, more of a, let me tell you the story of, that kind of thing. Telling the story of. There's an old Christian evangelical hymn, tell me the old story. Write on my heart every word. Some of you know that if you grew up in a good Baptist church or somewhere like that. Now, so this you remember Kelsus. Kelsus is great. He's a second century skeptic. He thinks popular religion is just ridiculous, and he writes against the Gospels. We don't even have his work. I wish we had his work. But Origen, the church father, early third century, writes a refutation of Celsus's refutation of Christianity. So you talk about high entertainment. If you want some reading to do, read what's called Against Celsus. I think I have a paperback copy somewhere here. Anyway, you can get a just like this penguin, you can get Contra Against Celsus. It's worth reading. So we reconstruct what his critique was, but here's a great summary. You don't really even need to read it. Celsus could claim that in Palestine and Syria, there were many who, look, notice his language, he's just dripping with sarcasm and sophisticated superiority, if you know what I mean, who wander about begging both in and outside of temples and frequent cities and camps on the pretense of prophesying. And any one of them is ready and accustomed to say, I am the God or son of a God or divine spirit, and I've come for the world is already on the point of destruction. And you, O men, will perish because of your injustice. But I wish to save you, and you shall see me again, returning with heavenly power. Blessed is he who worships me now. On all others, both in cities and the countryside, I shall cast eternal fire, and men who do not know the penalties awaiting them will repent in vain and mourn, but those whom I persuaded I shall save forever. So he's saying, he's saying, this is all over the place. There are all kinds of these gods and saviors and son of gods and so forth running around. And Origen, in replying, does not say there are no such people. He just says they have nothing to do with what the Hebrew Bible prophesied. Like they're not reflecting the messianic ideology of the Hebrew Bible. So that's basically how he argues there's a difference. There's a difference. They could sound alike, but they're not really alike. Okay. Now, this is actually Morton Smith again. This is him, not a quote. Behind this mob of divine or deified men, that's typical Morton Smith, calling him a mob. But there are dozens of these figures, and there are many varieties. Lay the Greek notion of the gods as being like men, possessing the human virtues to a higher degree, and possessing also gifts that men wanted, above all, immortality and eternal youth. Hence, it was natural and common to describe as divine, quotes, any man who excelled in any desirable capacity. Beauty, strength, wisdom, prestige, song, fame, skill in speaking, success in love, the patterns of speech thus established persisted to New Testament times, as conventional exaggerations and serve further to complicate the census of, quote, divine men. And then he looks at Asclepius as just an example. Asclepius, the great healer, was a physician, but he becomes a god, and stories and folklore begin to develop around him about his death. I won't read all of this, but this is a little rundown of what people were saying about him. And then you get Apollonius that I mentioned in the book, Philostratus's account. Both Jesus and Apollonius, to mention only two, were like Asclepius, primarily famous as miracle workers, healers, but like him acquired divine fathers, birth stories celebrated with motifs from folklore like the virgin birth, an angel appearing, you're going to get pregnant, but it won't be from a man, basically from God. Both were represented as teachers of morality who reform established temple procedures. So Jesus cleaning out the temple in Jerusalem would be the example in that case. They also institute their own mysteries. Jesus rivaled Asclepius, he says. Both were conceived as saviors and epiphanies of divine beings, and their prophetic oracles were preserved by their followers and so forth. At the end, their opponents accused them of magical powers, magicians. Jesus and Asclepius survived death, while Apollos escaped it by a miracle, and all three were finally taken to heaven. One can distinguish roughly the different social types of those who claimed or were credited with divinity. It's pretty broad. Prophets, poets, philosophers, rulers, athletes, physicians, magicians, and one might attempt a history of each. But there are too many borderline cases and too many tie-ins from one type to another. So it's a very fluid mix. And you're essentially talking about extraordinary stories of human beings that do all these great things. And then the studies began. And here you have Justin Martyr, I mentioned earlier. And he like Origen, he doesn't deny that there's some real strong parallels in the Jesus, say, Gospel of Mark and these other figures. He doesn't deny that. He says, well, that was demons imitating Christianity. Now, there's demons inspired these pagan writers to write about their wonder workers and their heroes and their divine men, so that when the real guy came, Jesus, our guy, you get fooled. You would do what I'm doing now. You would compare them all and go, oh, so what's the big deal about Jesus? It's almost like a pagan, so-called pagan. You understand my quote marks? A non-Christian, non-Jew hearing about Jesus and saying, "Well, that's interesting. We got five or six of those in our culture too. Wow, it's great that you have that, but we have that too." See. As he goes on, he talks about Bauer. This is Ferdinand Christian Bauer, one of my heroes uh, on Paul. He did Apollonius of Tyana and Christ. He wrote a book comparing Apollon, and this was in, let's see, footnote 101, 1832. So you can see it's got quite a history now, 200-year history. And then he's going through all these books that I'd never heard of for my PhD exams. And then here's Beeler, Theos and Air, the fullest analysis in a large section of material. And then Lucian, Peregrinus, Alexander. These are Lucian is the satirist of the second century. I want to do another session on this, and I'm going to give you a copy of Peregrinus and Alexander. Alexander is called Alexander the False Prophet. Lucian's making fun of him. Peregrinus becomes a Christian, so he's really important. He actually joins the Christians and becomes one of their leaders, according to Lucian. And then you've got Alexander the Great, you've got Suetonius writing about the emperors, and Beeler collects all those things. And what he tries to show are their patterns in terms of their uh, Appearance, character, supernatural knowledge, powers, mission, teachings, followers, surrounding world, and their relationship to the gods. Then there was a real backlash from 46 when I was born to 1960, where everybody's saying, no, no, the Gospels are different. You German rationalists, quit bringing in all that stuff. That's just confusing. Gospels are nothing like that. But then in the 50s and 60s, as you would expect, you get these works saying the Gospels are fundamentally different. The God is the Jewish God, not a Greek one. Uh, all kinds of Old Testament overtones. And remember, this is before the Dead Sea Scrolls were really getting the attention they get now. And so Christians identified with the divine man Jesus in his Jewish purpose. And this is the whole thing about Jesus was a Jew. He wasn't. This is still with us today in New Testament studies, very heavily, right? Uh, Jesus is different. He's Jewish. Don't compare him to Apollonius of Tyana or anybody like that. Okay, let's see. I think that's the important question is whether or not those literary forms, which because of their distinct content, modern critics have agreed to call aretalogies, so influenced either Jesus or his followers that many traditions about him and eventually the Gospels were automatically cast in similar forms. And he says such questions are comparatively unimportant. He's talking about, oh, Apollonius is this, but Jesus is that, and Jesus is that, and Apollonius doesn't do that. You know, tit for tat, they're not the same. So what he says is, here are two important facts. If these facts are admitted, then don't throw this out, this presentation, this idea that I'm introducing you. Many accounts of ancient divine men are variants of a recognizable aretalogical form. Remember, aretalogy is praising the wonders of a figure. The Gospels are more similar to these accounts than to any other non-Christian works that we know of. For example, we have biographies, strict biographies that are more like we would think of a biography, not divine birth, miracles, walking on what, the typical repertoire, casting out demons, causing mountains to move, whatever, striking dead your opponents, and so forth. Well, I would admit both of those. I would. I think they're still with us. So rather than be defensive and claim, look how different the Gospels are, I'm more for the idea of let's dive in, let's take a look at this material. So back to my blog, jamestabor.com. And if you are not familiar with this, please take a look at it on your own. You've got this nice little menu here, but the Jewish Roman world of Jesus, I call it. And this was developed from my courses that I taught over the years at three different universities. I developed a kind of a whole course pack for early Christianity, and I'm putting up slowly, I haven't done it yet, but all the original sources. So there's a historical overview of beginning readings, and then Hellenistic religion and philosophy, archaeology and the Dead Sea Scrolls, Christian origins in the New Testament, ancient Judaism, other general areas. You have to have an other, right? So here's the historical overview. I've shared these with you all before. The Roman world of Jesus, the Jewish world of Jesus. That should be under everybody's belt, so to speak. Understanding Hellenistic dualism. That should be under everybody's belt in terms of just those texts. This is the one I want to focus on today, and maybe this one a little bit, but we probably won't have time. But let's start on this one. And let me make this a bit larger here so you can see. Divine figures, heroes, and gods. I start out with this little introduction. One can compile a long list of legendary figures who are said to have once been human, but have now become immortal gods. Now, you can imagine my undergrad students reading this, like, what? I thought Jesus was the guy. Osiris, Dances, Hercules, Aristeus, Asclepius, Aeneas, Romulus, as well as many from the not so distant past, Alexander, various Roman emperors, Empedocles, Jesus, Pythagoras, Apollonius of Tyana. Often tales of such figures report some kind of an extraordinary birth, wondrous deeds, wise teachings, and usually an account of an ascent to heaven at or after death. And then I give some samples. By the way, this is what I want to emphasize. If Jesus, in the recovered Q document that I have expanded, if you find in there something that is just everyday common Jewish wisdom and platitudes from the Second Temple Jewish period, then my argument kind of fails because anybody could have just plugged into Jesus all kinds of things that are just commonly circulating in the culture. Now, maybe I'm being apologetic here. I don't know. I don't want to be, like giving Jesus extra shrift, like he's really important. But when I read that expanded Q, even though people say, these stories are basically modeled after Hebrew Bible stories. Recently, Derek Lambert in, uh, interviewed Marcus Vincent, who claims the entire corpus of the New Testament was written by Marcion, which I do not believe. And even Paul's letters were written by Marcion. This is this new thing going around. And one of his statements was, I can take every single thing in any of the Gospels and show you that it's simply developed from a Hebrew Bible legend or parallel. It's absolutely the same. And he's probably thinking of something like Elijah raised the young boy from the dead, and Jesus raised the young girl from the dead. You see, or somebody made, was it Elijah that made the axe float in the water, and Jesus said, "Oh, go in the water and you'll find a coin." And Dennis MacDonald has found things like that in Homer and so forth. Well, here's what I would say. I'm pausing here. I want to emphasize this wise teaching. The matrix, I hope I can be clear here. The matrix generally of the stuff I keep repeating, walking on water, raising the dead, ascending to heaven, casting out demons, this sort of repertoire, healing the sick, and so forth. Yes, all the divine men do all that stuff. But I think there's an underlying historical itinerary of Jesus that comes through the Gospels that is historical and can be investigated archaeologically. Like I can take you to the place where he stood before Pontius Pilate, the actual pavement, which John says at that place is a pavement called Gabbatha, and Gabbatha's been uncovered. You see what I'm saying? It's different. Apollonius doesn't have that kind of material. It just doesn't. It's different. But now I'm talking about the teachings. I don't think these teachings, I think Marcus is wrong. I would want to say to him, okay, let me take you through this proto-Luke version of Q, and you show me the parallels uh, to, I would just pick various things. And I mean, there's always going to be very broad parallels between anything, but anyway. So, but here we're dealing with the divine man, and this is just a quick thing we're going to go through. I won't read all these, but Plato. Okay, Plato. Wow, great figure. He's the son of Ariston and Perictione. He was an Athenian. This is Diogenes Laertius, who writes the Lives of the Philosophers. It's 2 volumes in the Loeb. And then he names other people. All say that there was at Athens a, sorry, it's jumping around. It has to do with my cursor. I need to quit pressing it. All say that there was at Athens, all say, okay, a story that when Perictione was ready to bear children, Ariston was trying desperately but did not succeed in making her pregnant. Then, after he ceased his efforts, I find that kind of funny, like, okay, I give up. Don't sleep with you anymore. He saw a vision of Apollo. Therefore, he abstained from any further marital relations until she brought forth a child. That's how you know it's Apollo, because he didn't sleep with her anymore. Plato was born on the seventh day of Targelion. Now, this is real proof, which was the day the Delians say Apollo was born. So, how would the birth fit exactly to the day that Apollo was born, according to the Delians? Okay, this is trashy stuff. I mean, Diogenes is known as the collector of gossip, but it does show you something about the culture and how people would spin their tales. Okay, this is Diodorus, who's a pretty good historian. I mean, we need him for Roman history. The excellence begotten in Hercules was not only seen in his great acts, but was known before his birth. When Zeus lay with Alcmene, he tripled the length of the night. So suddenly a night lasts 8 hours and it lasts three times that. Wow. 24-hour night. That's a long night. And he's having sex, I guess, for 24 hours to beget that great child. And that foreshadowed the exceptional power of the child who was begotten. All in all, this union was not done because of an erotic desire, as with other women. Normally, that might be his purpose, but more for the purpose of creating the child, because he wished to make the intercourse legitimate, and he did not wish to take Alcmene by force, nor could he ever hope to seduce her because of her self-control. He chose deceit. So how did he fool her? He turned himself into her husband in every way. So she was thinking, wow, Perictiani's really changed, you know. He's he doesn't seem like my husband. So those are two birth stories. I hope you're enjoying them. And then we have the story from Ovid, Metamorphoses, of how Romulus was giving friendly laws to citizens, and Mars, the god, caught him up, and his mortal body became thin, dissolving in the air as a lead pellet shot by a broad sling will melt away in the sky. You know, kind of like Superman flying, and he gets smaller and smaller. And suddenly he had such a beautiful form, more worthy of the high couches, the gods who dwell in heaven. So that's Romulus as he's talking on his last day on Earth, and then he's caught up into heaven and kind of his body melts and he becomes a divine being. And here's Empedocles. A search is made for Empedocles. He disappears after sitting at table with his companions, and at daybreak they ready to have breakfast and he's gone, and they question the servant, and the servant says in the middle of the night he heard a voice calling Empedocles, and he got up and he looked out and there was a light in the heavens, and they decide he has gone to heaven. He's disappeared. Disappearing body. He's just gone. Very similar to the empty tomb with no appearances in Mark. He's just gone. He is not here. He has been lifted up. That's the translation of Mark. He's been lifted up. Doesn't say resurrected. He's been lifted up. As he said, I'll see you in the Galilee, which they had seen the transfigured Jesus. But previously he had said, all hail, I go about you as an immortal God, but no more immortal. So he had supposedly once said that before he disappeared. And here's more examples I give you. They're in your bibliography. Then I do decide to include these are things I do in the course with students. I give them copies of some of these articles to read. My courses are pretty hard for undergrads, but they got into this stuff like you wouldn't believe. That this also affects Judaism. We've got births of Moses, Isaac's divine conception, Samson the demigod. Who is Samson's real father? And then I wrote this one, returning to the divinity. Josephus portrays the disappearance of Enoch, Elijah, and Moses, just like a divine man. So you see the idea. Now, that to me means if I have a Hebrew Bible account of the death of Moses, which I do, last chapter of Deuteronomy, right? And I have Josephus portraying it in the guise of the Hellenistic divine man. You can read my article. It's on jamestabor.com under our papers and publications, that category at the top, so you can download it as a PDF. Then you can see how a core story based on the death of Moses, uh, where he's buried and no one knows the grave and so forth, can be embellished into one of these divine men so that basically Josephus is saying, we have those too. Our Moses was kind of like that. He's like a god. He's divine. So this is just a Hellenistic development. I put this beautiful picture of the tomb of Apollonius for you. Look at the motifs. He's flying up to heaven and he's getting hailed by, in this case, I think that's a woman. Yep, a woman, and also one of his disciples, maybe. And I guess angels and eagles are taking him up. So you've got that as well. Now, this is a very, very important inscription that was found uh, in the time of Augustus. Uh, and we think these were all over the empire, sorry. And it's talking about Augustus. And the language is very superfluous. It just sounds, if you know Roman literature, this is the kind of proclamation you would make on the streets of Rome with a loud voice standing on a little soapbox, or a little platform. Like, hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. You get the idea? Whereas the providence which has guided our whole existence and which has shown such care and liberality has brought our life to the peak of perfection in giving to us Augustus Caesar. Well, he's just a Roman general named Octavian, right? But all of a sudden, whom providence has filled with virtue for the welfare of mankind, and who being sent to us and to our descendants as a savior. So now he's a soter. Jesus is called the Savior. What has he done? Look at these messianic things. He's put an end to war. He's set all things in order, having become visible, meaning he was a god, but he came down and became a man. This is the emperor of Rome. He became visible. Caesar has fulfilled the hopes of all earlier times. Everything we ever hoped and dreamed in having a savior come to this world and finally showing us the way, we've got it now. Now it gets worse or better, depending on your point of view. Not only surpassing all the benefactors who preceded him, but also in leaving to his successors no hope of surpassing him. So he's the best ever, and nobody will ever be what he was after him. Does this start sounding like a Jesus figure to you as Jesus became the one and only, sent down, become visible? We call it incarnation. No one will come after him. No one was like him before. And whereas finally the birthday of the God, now he's just outright called a God, has been for the whole world the beginning of the gospel concerning him. Now people read that and go, was this influenced by the gospels? No, this is Augustus, Caesar, before Jesus. Okay, this is before the time of Jesus. So the language and the shape of this is so important for us to get the flavor of the times. Jesus is plugged into this. He's just plugged into it. And I want to say to you, well, then leave all that out. I want to get back to the James Jesus, the Jesus that James knew, the Jesus that Mary knew. And that's what my book, The Lost Mary, is about, trying to give you the historical reality of those times and what it was like. But notice his birthday is the beginning of the gospel, and it is the word evangelion. So gospel is not a holy word. I should have made it capital. Concerning him, capital letter. Therefore, let all reckon a new era beginning from the date of his birth, and let his birthday mark the beginning of a new year. Wow, isn't that amazing? Christmas, and then January coming right after the winter solstice. I don't I don't know his birthday, but so this is an amazing text. So here we have Caligula. Here he is, and he's also being the council of the people of the Ephesians, one of Paul's cities, and other Greek cities. And notice 38 BC, Paul might be operating right at this time as a Christian already if he was converted around 37. Uh, in 41, Caligula orders his statue to be set up in the Jewish temple. Remember that story? He gets assassinated. So this is just 2 years before that. The council and the people of the Ephesians and other Greek cities, which dwell in Asia, where Paul is going to spend years of work, and the nations acknowledge Gaius Julius, the son of Gaius Caesar, as high priest and absolute ruler. Look at this. The God visible, that's incarnation, who is born of Aries and Aphrodite, the shared savior of human life. These are official proclamations of Rome about the deification. This one I put in just because it's so entertaining. We don't know who this is, Appian. He's just a Roman soldier. But it shows you how this has reached the general population. He's in the Navy. He's writing to his father Epimachus around 150, and the letters has been survived, has been recovered. So Appian to Epimachus, his father and Lord. So it shows you can call Lord your father, meaning sir. You're being respectful to your father. Many greetings, and that this is in Greek, so it'd say Kyrios. So when you call Jesus Kyrios, he's the master. Before all things, I pray, he's writing to dad, that you're in health and that you prosper and fare and well continually, along with my sister, her daughter, and brother. Isn't that like we write letters today? Dear dad, please tell my sister hello. I hope everybody's doing well. Tell mom I'm okay. Here's the line I love. Second line. I thank the Lord Serapis. Wow. Serapis is a god in heaven. He used to be a human being. That when I was in peril in the sea, he saved me immediately. So apparently he was shipwrecked and he cried out to Serapis. And right then someone showed up and gave him a line or something. And, somehow he survived. And then he got paid. He's a Navy man. 3 pieces of gold from Caesar. And it's well. And he says, I beg you, therefore, my Lord Father. Now you'll love this. Any of you have kids? Write me a little letter. Tell me about your health, my brother, my sister. And he doesn't mention his mother. And third, that I may do obeisance to you, to your hand, because you've taught me well, and therefore hope to advance quickly if the gods will. Salute Capito much, my brother and sister. Sarah Neela and my friends. We don't know any of these people. I send you by Euctemon a little picture. So probably at the port, he had a little color drawing made of himself painted on wood. We have these. They're little portraits. They're beautiful. They look very real. You know how you have portrait drawers on beaches and different fairs. You have somebody, let me draw your portrait. This has been going on for thousands of years. So I sent a little picture with this letter. Moreover, my name is Antonius Maximus. Fare thee well, I pray. Centuria Athena, this is his company. And then he gives all of these things. And then I really like this. How do you mail a letter in the imperial post? Give this to Philadelphia for Epimachus from Appian his son. So he's living in Philadelphia. We have Philippians. Give this to the first cohort of the Apamenians, to Julius something, we can't read it, from Appian, so that he may convey it to Epimachus his father. So what's the bottom line today? I think the gospel materials have great parallels in terms of literature and genre with the Ausonian materials. We shouldn't deny that. It's not a problem to me. I mean, why would they not conform to the kind of writing styles of their period and of their time? But I sound like an apologist here. Maybe I'm trying to defend the dignity of my own work and research, but I don't think that in any way means that we cannot talk about the historical figure of Jesus in pretty concrete ways. So yeah, I'm still tracking Jesus. I'm st I'm still trying to find where he was. And I haven't read Apollonius in years, and I'm going to read it this month. I've decided to read it this month. Reread it. I've got the Loeb edition over here. And the reason I want to reread it, I haven't read it since grad school in the 70s, is I want to see if I could lead a tracking Apollonius tour and pitch it to you guys. And I'm being facetious here, but the idea would be, does it lend itself to that much historicity?